Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, May 29th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Bottle of Lies. The inside story of the generic drug boom with investigative reporter, Fortune contributor Katherine Eban. Also on the program, big press conference today by Robert Muller. Muller says Mueller time is over. But is it? Also on the program today, shocker. Mitch McConnell is all like, Merrick Garland, what? Who? We can sit a judge in 2020. Joe Biden announces an education plan. Sanders offers workers dividends and board membership. Meanwhile, Republicans stall disaster aid in the House again. Iran says some in the U.S. want war, and John Bolton simultaneously pretends he didn't sabotage the Iranian nuke deal. Meanwhile, Dems look at their 24 candidate field and tighten the requirements for later debates. Bibi Netanyahu faces a deadline in just hours from now to form a new government. Let's hope he fails. Ben Shapiro defends himself as a convicted Nazi sympathizer, says that the non-Orthodox Jew disdainer, that would be Shapiro, led him to the alt-right and to commit acts of anti-Semitism.
You don't say.
More and more people are talking about Harriet Tubman. And the Department of Energy says it's freedom gas to you. All this and more on today's program. Folks, we are so jam-packed today. At 11 a.m., Robert Mueller made an announcement. We have some clips from that. Tomorrow on the program, Marcy Wheeler will be joining us. Very well timed once again. And we have a lot to get through today, not the least of which Mitch McConnell, of course, saying 2020, we can sit a justice then. So anticipate perhaps that is an indication that maybe that Clarence Thomas is deciding to retire, or just that McConnell is, getting his ducks lined up in the event that there is a one of the justices on the nominal left end up retiring or passing or whatever. I mean, this should not be a surprise. I mean, anybody who's even remotely surprised about this should have their head checked. And we should also say that. And we're going to do a deep dive into the what appears to be disturbing, sort of sad, bit of a breakdown that Dave Rubin's having. It's not funny.
It's a wonderful day here in Los Angeles.
He had a very tough day yesterday. And, we'll get into this more. But I just want to make this clear. Yes, I will laugh at Dave Rubin.
Me too.
But I'll laugh at myself, too. Which is not to say that I think that I'm Dave Rubin. But that could blow your mind if you think about that. My point is like I'm not going to pretend like I don't have a laugh at other people's expense, just like people have a laugh at my expense as a comedian. You have tough skin, thick skin, and but when we go through this stuff, I want to make it clear that like I actually do think that it's the least that I can do. Right? Like, I mean, I think like part of what we do here, I think we have a multi-pronged mission that has developed over the years. One is to bring you, works that have been done by people who write about policy or who investigate issues like what's going on with our generic drugs we have today. One of them is to push, frankly, an ideology, maybe sort of like a broad spectrum of left ideologies on this program. And the other, which I think is probably the, I don't know if it's dramatically different from the mission I may have had during the radio days.
To make Dave Rubin feel seen.
Well, but it's not specifically Dave Rubin, but it's basically to sort of say what is the most toxic information, valves of information that people are getting that me, with my little butterfly wings, have any ability to in any way curtail. And that is an extremely limited, mission. My ambitions are not huge. Dave Rubin is not baby Hitler, and we don't have an opportunity to suffocate baby Hitler here. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think there are people, and we've documented it in the past, who head down a very toxic pathway that is basically highlighted, door open by Dave Rubin and others, and we go after them as well. So that's why we do this.
Who's laughing now, Sam?
Well, there's others too, but we'll get to that. But the important stuff is Muller right now, and we have footage of Justin Amash apparently doubling down in front of cheering crowds of his own constituents, calling for impeachment. Robert Mueller today, I think, got up there and basically said, in a very much more reserved way, hey, what more do you want out of me? I just gave you your impeachment indictments, charges. But let's go through these, a couple of these clips. We also have a clip, I think, that shows fairly conclusively that Bill Barr is just a liar. I mean, let's start with Robert Mueller saying that they did not make a determination that Donald Trump did not commit a crime. If they had, they would have said so.
If we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime. The introduction to the volume 2 of our report explains that decision. It explains that under long-standing department policy, a president cannot be charged with a federal crime while he is in office. That is unconstitutional. Even if the charge is kept under seal and hidden from public view, that too is prohibited. The special counsel's office is part of the Department of Justice, and by regulation, it was bound by that department policy.
Pause it. Okay. So, all right, take that away. So there you have it. This is not an exoneration for Donald Trump. I mean, he specifically came out and said that. We did not, if we had made a determination, if it was really clear that the president had not committed a crime, we would have said so. They did not determine that he made a crime. But what does he say immediately after that? The Department of Justice says we can't make that determination. It is impossible for us to make that determination. When the investigation starts, when there is no evidence investigated whatsoever, there is nothing that we can find that can allow us to charge the president with the commission of a crime. And he just said, or he will in a clip in a moment, he will say, we would never say that he committed a crime because there is no judicial means in which for him to defend himself. So we're not in a position to do that. By we, he means the Department of Justice. Now, here is Bill Barr lying about this a couple of weeks ago. Now, he does it very, very carefully. The words but for is something that you learn in law school. And it means that but for the existence of something, something else would have happened. That's what a but for is. But it's an all or nothing thing. And so Bill Barr thinks he's being pretty clever here. But listen to the language he uses versus the language that Mueller is using. Bill Barr basically creates a straw man but for.
On March 5th, we specifically asked him about the OLC opinion and whether or not he was taking the position that he would have found a crime but for the existence of the OLC opinion. And he made it very clear several times that that was not his position. He was not saying that but for the OLC opinion, he would have found a crime. He made it clear that he had not made the determination that there was a crime.
Okay. So he made it clear that there was, now that is true. He did not play that last line again. The number of double negatives that these guys using is very, very, I think, specific. Go ahead.
And he made it very clear several times that that was not his position. He was not saying that but for the OLC opinion, he would have found a crime. He made it clear that he had not made the determination that there was a crime.
Okay, so yes, he had made the determination that there was that there was not, that he had made the determination that there was not. So play it one more time. It really is tough to get your arms around this. But basically what Barr is saying is that the last sentence he says is true, but that's not necessarily a function of the sentence that precedes it.
He was not saying that but for the OLC opinion, he would have found a crime. He made it clear that he had not made the determination that there was a crime.
Yeah, because he couldn't ever make that determination.
Exactly. And he wasn't saying that but for the OLC opinion, he would have found a crime, because that's not the order in which this goes. He wasn't looking for a crime because he could not look for a crime.
Not the game he was playing.
Not the game he was playing. And here he is, Mueller, making that point very clear today. Mueller has a written statement. He says he doesn't want to testify in front of Congress because his report speaks for itself. Reports don't speak, incidentally. You have to read them. But that aside, the words he speaks today, were very specifically to address what Barr has said about him in the past. Listen carefully what he says here about why there was no charges brought. This follows exactly after he says we did not determine that the president did not commit a crime. And we did not determine that he did commit a crime. And if we had the former, we would have said so. We did not determine that he did a crime. And then he says, why? And the why is because that's not possible. We are not in a position to determine that he committed a crime. We're not allowed to do that. We don't have that ability. We don't have that ability any more than Sam Seder has that ability. Sam Seder does not have the right, the means, the capacity, the standing to determine that a crime was committed. Neither does Robert Mueller. This is all him saying to Congress, this is your job. Here's the evidence. But I can't do it any more than Sam Seder could.
Second, the opinion says that the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing.
To accuse. He cannot accuse. Period. End of story. He can't even set out to accuse the president. Period. End of story. He is on a fact-finding mission and is supposed to give that information to Congress. Continue.
Sitting president of wrongdoing. And beyond department policy, we were guided by principles of fairness. It would be unfair to potentially accuse somebody of a crime when there can be no court resolution of the actual charge. So that was Justice Department policy. Those were the principles under which we operated, and from them we concluded that we would not reach a determination one way or the other about whether the president committed a crime.
Pause it. How can anybody say that that's not a but for? From those principles, that we cannot charge a sitting president with a crime, that there's a constitutional process and not a judiciary process for charging him with a crime, and basic fairness says that we could not accuse him of a crime. That's a but for.
Well, that's his job, right? He's the liar general.
Bill Barr. And so this is, Mueller got up there today and basically said, about as explicitly as you could, Donald Trump could have shot somebody. We could have had videotape of it. And we could not accuse him of a crime. That is the bottom line. And he is saying to Congress, we found the videotape. We got the testimony from the people in the room. It's your job to accuse him of a crime. And that's what we witnessed today.
Can I ask a potentially dumb question? How did the OLC come to the opinion that you can't indict the president? Because that just seems super wrong to me.
Well, that is, I mean, legal scholars would say that opinion is wrong, or some would, and we need to go to the Supreme Court and have this argument. The Supreme Court may or may not take it up. The Office of Legal Counsel is basically the Department of Justice's opinion wing. And they basically say that's our opinion. And we're going to operate under those auspices unless a court tells us otherwise. Very unlikely that a court would say otherwise because they don't want to get involved in that. And they say, look, there's a constitutional remedy for this. It is called impeachment. And that's the way that it was set up. But yeah, there's a lot of people who think that opinion is wrong. But this is where law and sort of practicality smack up against each other. And this is what, when they say about there's a constitutional crisis, these are the type of things that they're talking about.
Well, if I was the court, I'd be like, that's just like your opinion, man, and go forward.
Yeah. I mean,
that's not how it works.
Well, we'll see. I mean, if we get the right president, maybe we can get you nominated.
Hell yeah. That would be quite the twist in my career.
Never saw that coming. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Bottle of Lies with Katherine Eban. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program investigative journalist, Fortune magazine contributor, Andrew Carnegie Fellow, Katherine Eban, and her latest Bottle of Lies, the inside story of the generic drug boom. Welcome to the program, Katherine.
Thanks so much, Sam, for having me.
I am fascinated by this stuff, and every year, twice a year actually, I go to a tort lawyer conference in Las Vegas. And oftentimes, many of the tort lawyers, I know it's a very strange thing to do. It's even stranger if you knew me, but it's fascinating to me. And many times I hear stories of that are very similar to the ones that you're talking about. Of course, yours are far more in depth and cover more of the broad. I heard a story about valsartan and a generic version of that, or the active ingredient, which had been produced in China and had been tainted. It's a heart drug that had been tainted with jet fuel. And,
that's right, an ingredient that used to be used in liquid rocket fuel.
And that was a very narrow story. And then to see your book and to realize that is the tip of an iceberg, it is terrifying. But before we get to the problems with generic drugs, let's start with Cipla. Cipla, if I'm saying that right, this is basically the beginning of generic drugs. Tell us the origins of generic drugs.
Yeah. So there was an Indian company called Cipla and a very heroic CEO named Yusuf Hamid who got the idea that it is outrageous that all of these Africans should be dying of AIDS while the drugs necessary to cure them existed, but were tied up with brand name patents. And so he came out and announced to the world at around 2001 that he was going to make these drugs available for $1 a day. And the brand name companies tried to stop him because it was intellectual property, and the world basically came in behind Hamid and said, this is the right thing to do. Eventually, brand name companies caved. Hamid produced these drugs ultimately for 38 cents a day, joined by a number of other Indian companies. U.S. taxpayers began footing the bill to send those drugs to Africa. It's humanitarian and the right thing to do. But along the way, there was this question, how do we verify the quality of these drugs? So the FDA, which is our main regulators, came up with an abbreviated process for reviewing quality, deemed the drugs okay, and that gave everybody an idea. Well, wait a second. Our own regulators say these drugs are okay. Nobody at home can pay brand name drug prices. Why don't we take these drugs too? And that really was the beginning of the generic drug boom in this country. And one of the reasons why our drug supply is now 90% generic, and 40% of all those generics are manufactured in India. The majority of all our drugs are manufactured overseas in India and China.
Okay, so this is and it was it the Hatch-Waxman Act? Was that basically changed things, or when did that kick in?
Yeah, so that was a law that was passed in 1984, and what that did is it created a pathway at the FDA for generic drug makers to come in and prove that their drugs were bioequivalent, could be absorbed at the same into the bloodstream at the same rate, but they didn't have to prove safety and efficacy because the idea was, well, brand name companies have already proven that. But the Hatch-Waxman Act did something else very important. It created a huge financial incentive for generic drug makers. It was called First to File, and it said the first generic companies to file their application with the FDA and get approved will get 6 months of exclusivity on the market at about 80% of the brand name price. And that just set off this gold rush among generic drug makers to be first to market. So as I describe in my book, there were generic drug executives camped out overnight in the FDA parking lot, sleeping in stretch limos, waiting for the doors of the FDA to open the next morning so they could go and file their application.
What was the theory behind, and people should know, like, that we're just sort of like setting the table here for how we got to where we are. And I want to circle back to the idea that, some 80 to 90% of our drugs are actually made overseas, which is sort of stunning when you contemplate how much we hear about scaremongering about buying our drugs from Canada, let's say. But put that aside for a moment. What was the theory behind that first to file provision in the Hatch-Waxman Act?
So the theory was, if generic companies are going to have to brave almost certain litigation by brand name companies, then they need a deal sweetener. They need an incentive, something that'll make it financially worth it. And this was the deal sweetener, that they could get this 6 months of exclusivity. And that just occasioned this rush to file applications, be first to market, and to get that 6 months exclusivity.
What is the nature of that litigation that was anticipated from brand name, that you guys are stepping on our patents?
Yeah, basically that, brand name companies erect this barricade of patents around their drugs. They patent not just the molecule, they patent the process by which it's manufactured, they may patent the time release mechanism, and the whole idea is just to prevent anyone else from coming in and making their product. And so any generic drug company that wants to make a version of their drug is going to have to go to court, and it's going to cost a lot of money. So that was why they introduced a deal sweetener.
Okay, and I want to sort of like come back through all this, but let's also just go back a little bit so that we just get the idea of like where generics came from. My understanding, they basically started in India as basically a Gandhi's, and under the sort of the rubric of Gandhi's nationalism.
Right. Well, there's the story I describe in the book that Gandhi went to Yusuf Hamid's father, who started CIPLA, and said, "Look, it was World War II. The British have promised us our freedom, but in order to do that, they want us to help out with the war effort, and they need pharmaceuticals because the supply from Europe has collapsed. So if you can step up and manufacture drugs for the Indian Army, then this will be going a long way to helping to lead to a free India." And that's really how it started.
Okay, so we get the development of the generic drugs. It comes through in the 80s. The Hatch-Waxman Act basically provides almost not necessarily a safe harbor for first to file, but an incentive for people to withstand the onslaught of litigation they're going to have to wade through if they're the first to release this. Is it these patents that are built around, just if you could just, I guess, walk us through what's in a drug? I mean, I don't think people fully understand sort of like, how could there be subsidiary patents around it? How is a generic drug structured? Just, sort of almost, I guess, dissect the generic drug for us so that we understand this.
Sure. So let's start with what a brand name drug is. It will have an active ingredient, which is sort of the principal molecule that does the healing. And in addition to that, it's going to have what are called excipients, which are additional ingredients. And then it may have some kind of time release mechanism, right? And all of that has been manufactured to be in a specific form, whether it's a tablet, a capsule, injectable. And it's all been engineered so it dissolves properly in the body. And then the way that's measured is the extent of the absorption into the bloodstream. So that's a drug. So the generic companies come along, and, one common misunderstanding is people think, well, the brand company hands over the recipe to the generic. That almost never happens. Instead, generic companies have reverse engineering chemists who take a brand name drug, they break it down in the laboratory, they see how it's put together, and then they try to recreate it. They're going to use the same active ingredient. It has to be in the same format, tablet, capsule, but they're going to do a lot of things differently. There's going to be different manufacturing steps. There's going to be different additional ingredients. There's probably going to be a different time release mechanism, and it's going to dissolve differently in the body. So it's not identical. It's a version of the brand name drug.
Is there now I understand, at least in principle, like, oh, well, we've already tested the active ingredient in this, and we've found through clinical trials that it's safe for human. Is there not any, I guess, analog to testing the new formulation? Like, how do we know that these chemists are good at their job? Like, they've reverse engineered it and they've found, the active ingredient that's on the label, but they don't know how it's been prepared. Like, I know if you slice an onion one way, it has different implications of slicing it a different way in terms of the way that it cooks or something like that. Is there not something equivalent in that way? Like, maybe if you prepare this active ingredient in this way, it actually mutates into some other active ingredient. Or if you combine it with this mechanism for blood absorption, it actually has this side effect as opposed to that side effect. I mean, do we have a testing process of like how this stuff is reconfigured that it might have other implications, or am I just don't know anything about chemistry and don't understand? I mean, I think both are possible.
It's a great question you're asking, because it takes us really to the center of the issue, which is the way that generic companies demonstrate that their drug is effective is through testing of the drug. So they're testing, they test on, say, 20 to 25 different patients, the absorption into the blood. But they also test in the laboratory. How does it dissolve? How quickly does it dissolve? Is it stable? There's something called stability testing, where they test, does it disintegrate? How quickly does it disintegrate? Under what conditions does it disintegrate? And all of that testing is accompanied by data that's really a kind of minute-to-minute laboratory blueprint of the way that drug performs. And that data is really sacrosanct. It's at the center of the manufacturing process, and the companies have to submit that data to the FDA to get approval to manufacture a drug.
Okay, and so we are trusting that they're giving us the real data. Before we examine that, that dynamic, are there benchmarks set by the original drug? So you're saying, like, it tests dissolution, it tests absorption, all this. Are there public, or at least does the FDA have benchmarks of the original drug? And to the extent that the FDA does the generic maker know what those benchmarks are, or are they at least doing it blind and handing it to the FDA?
Right. Well, there are certain standards that are set out by different regulatory bodies. For example, like the United States Pharmacopoeia is a standard-setting organization, and that standard-setting organization says, in order for this antibiotic to be viable, it has to contain this much active ingredient. So there are those kinds of benchmarks that are public, and they're based on the standards that are set by the brand name companies. But that's a little bit different than just handing over your entire cookbook, your recipe of how to make the drug.
Okay, so when this data comes in, and maybe before we even address, the fact that you have these drug companies saying, like, oh, here's our data, and whether we have a way of validating that data. Why don't you address that before I ask the next question? Do we just simply trust these generic drug companies to say, like, oh, here's our data. We didn't look at the back of the book and see what the answers should be, in terms of absorption rates or whatnot. And here it is. Are we okay? Is that basically what happens?
The answer to this question is a little bit shocking. which is that the FDA is essentially regulating these companies on an honor system. They are reviewing this data. Now, in addition to that, they are also they perform what's called a pre-approval inspection, which is they go to the manufacturing plant to see if the company can actually make the drug. Is it safely run? Is it in an outhouse? Is it in the middle of nowhere? So they do a pre-approval inspection, but this is a key distinction. A lot of these drugs are made overseas, and when the FDA does an overseas inspection, it notifies the companies weeks, sometimes months in advance that its investigators will be coming.
And I think you have I don't know if it's a quote necessarily in the book, but it's you tell the story that one guy said like, oh, we have access to cheap labor that we could actually create an entirely new facility with the amount of lead time they give us, and that one will be good.
That's right. I mean, they can make anything look like anything. So, what they will do is bring in teams to, and maybe we want to lead into this because this is where this is going.
This is where things get a little bit dark, folks. But let's just start with this question before we get there. Why are, and I think you said 90% of our generics are made overseas between, I guess, India and China and maybe a couple other countries in terms of where particularly the active ingredient is made. Why is that?
It's it's a long story with globalization at its core. Western companies realized that they could slash their labor costs, supply costs if they moved manufacturing overseas. There were much looser environmental regulations, and manufacturing of drugs throws off a huge amount of pollution. So there were all kinds of reasons why Western companies were looking to cut their costs, and there were all kinds of reasons why Indian and Chinese companies wanted to get into our market, which is the world's biggest and most lucrative.
Well, how much were they?
This was a win-win for all these companies.
How much were they also conscious of the fact that being not in close proximity to the FDA, like literally the FDA offices, is going to benefit us? I mean, back when I was in show business, we would say like, oh, if we're going to shoot a show, let's shoot it as far away from the executives as possible. It's going to mean less scrutiny. And I mean, how much were they conscious
100%.
of that? Okay.
They were absolutely conscious of that. So basically, you have all these companies who are 7,000 miles away from Maryland, where the FDA has its headquarters, and they are able to evade scrutiny with that distance, and literally the closer you move towards FDA headquarters, the more scrutiny you are under.
Okay, and so let's get into a couple of the horror stories. But before we do, when people say like we can't buy drugs from Canada because they don't have the same standards or mechanisms to determine, that these drugs are pure or whatnot, that seems like a lie. Because I got to imagine that the Canadian, you tell me, maybe you don't know about Canada's procedures, but the idea that the FDA inspections happen with significant advance warning suggests to me that our system is pretty weak. Your whole book is about that, essentially. But does Canada have, do they have a similar procedure for, generic drugs?
Well, here's the problem with buying your drugs from Canada. If you buy your drugs from Canada, you're probably buying your drugs from India. They're getting Indian generics too. And usually when you buy from sort of online Canadian pharmacies, there's little fine print in the disclosures which says, if we don't have this drug in stock, you authorize us to purchase it from our offshore partners. And let me tell you, when you're buying a drug, you don't want drugs from an offshore partner. So, I am skeptical about this idea that in this, snowy, clean place called Canada, you're getting quote unquote Canadian drugs. But in a way, that's a kind of a somewhat different issue. But, it speaks to the fact that there is a global drug supply, and India and China have become pharmacies to the world, And regulators, whether they're in Canada, Europe, the U.S., really don't have a firm handle on what is going on in those plants. And that's really the story I'm telling in my book.
Is there any, well, let's talk about the failure of our regiment, and then we can talk about whether it's any different than Canada's, for that matter. Or, I mean, I guess Canada's saying, well, we buy it from India, that may not be subject to any, the Canadian version of the FDA. But let's talk about, I guess, Sortret or Sotret. Am I pronouncing that right? Sotret. And this is by Ranbaxy. Is that the company? Yeah. This is sort of your premier nightmare story, I guess. Although we can also talk about you have a vignette of this guy Peter Baker, who basically, I don't know, that one's almost like low-hanging fruit. But talk to us about Sortret, because I think this is indicative of a major problem, obviously.
Sure. So there is a brand-name drug called Accutane, and it's an anti-acne drug. But it's a pretty scary drug in that it came with what's called a black box warning. And the FDA warned people you can't take it when you're pregnant. They warn manufacturers we have to monitor how much you sell, where it comes from, all of that, because of the health hazards that are associated with it. It produced increased suicidality in teenagers. So it was a dangerous, scary drug. Ranbaxy got approval from the FDA to make a generic version. Their version was called Sotret. Now, basically, Ranbaxy was telling the FDA everything's fine. But they had a meeting, their executives, in a Boca Raton hotel, in which they were confronting internal testing of the drug, which showed their version of the drug was failing. It was dissolving incorrectly. This exposed patients to incredible hazards. Instead of disclosing it to the FDA and pulling the drugs from the market, which is what the company should have done, these executives in this hotel made a secret pact to keep the drug on the market, and even while they're selling it to patients, to go back into the laboratory and see if they can't fix the manufacturing problems. And the way they fixed it is pretty scary, and they didn't actually fix it ultimately, but what they did was scary, which is they swapped out ingredients. They took out certain ingredients and they put in different ingredients to try to make it dissolve correctly. The problem is you can't make an ingredient change without the FDA's approval. And the company did this all in secrecy. And they had an internal report in which they wrote up all of their findings about how the drug was failing with a big cover sheet on it that said, do not share with the FDA. And when the FDA raided their offices in New Jersey in 2007, they got a copy of that report.
And this was all started from a guy who had studied, I guess, in the States, right? This Thakur, is it Dinesh Thakur?
Yeah.
And he came in, he provides a report for them, and their first reaction is, how can we destroy every copy of this report?
Right. So what happened with Thakur, he was a young engineer who was working at Bristol Myers Squibb and got this job offer to go to India's biggest generic drug company. So he packs up his family, he leaves New Jersey, comes to this giant Indian company, and his boss, who has also come from Britain from a brand name company, begins to get suspicious about the data that the company is filing with regulators around the world. And as we spoke about before, this is quality data that has a direct impact on whether the drugs are okay to take or not. So his boss gives him this assignment. I want you to go into every dossier for every drug we've filed around the world with regulators and investigate whether we have data that supports those drug applications. Thakur gets his team together. They do this investigation, and they discover this horrible secret, which is that over 200 drug products in over 40 countries have been filed with either data that didn't exist and was just fabricated, or that was changed, or in some cases the company was using brand name drugs and running data off of those drugs and presenting it as though it was tests for the generic. I mean, there were all kinds of substitutions. And this report that Tucker created got shown to a subcommittee of the board of directors, and their reaction was, how do we bury this, and let's destroy the laptop on which this report was created. Wow.
Now, this company has since been basically bought out. It doesn't exist anymore, at least in that form. What's your sense of how many of these stories are out there? I mean, you tell the story of Peter Baker. I think it opens up the book when he's investigating. He's there inspecting a manufacturing plant, and literally, it almost seems comedic. There's a guy who just looks like he's shady and runs away as the inspector's coming and tries to ditch a bag of reports that say, oh, there's all sorts of horrible, I think it was metal shards in this insulin production.
Yep.
How much of this do you think is actually going on? Is there any reason to believe? So, Rand Baxi gets fined $500 million, which is probably, the equivalent of, me leaving the lights on in the office over the weekends in terms of the cost of doing business for them. Maybe there is some civil litigation that they end up having to pay more, but they still, at the end of the day, it really is just not a question of anything other than what's our profit margin going to be on this? Is it going to be, 60% or, 35% or something? But what is this fixed? Do you take generic drugs? I mean, and really, is there any reason for us to be, comfortable with brand name drugs, for that matter, because they get their active ingredient from these same places, don't they?
So look, there's so much in what you just said. So let me just start with this, which is I did a big story in Fortune magazine in 2013 about Ranbaxy, which ended up pleading guilty to 7 felonies. So my question, and really the beginning of this book project, was, was Ranbaxy an outlier or the tip of the iceberg? And in my reporting, I began investigating the generic drug industry and essentially through whistleblowers penetrating these plants overseas. And what I realized is that the behavior of Ranbaxy really reflected more of an industry norm. Now, Peter Baker is one of the characters that I follow, and as you say, the book opens with this low-speed chase through this hallway in a manufacturing plant in Aurangabad, India. But what he found, Baker, over 5 years, he inspected 86 plants in India and China, and he found outright fraud or some aspect of data deception, which was concealing or altering the quality of the drugs, or concealing or altering the environment in the plant, data that, reflecting the plant, in 4/5 of the companies he went into.
Wow.
This was 67 out of 86 plants he found fraud, which really, I think, tells you that this is endemic throughout the industry.
Wow. And so what about non-generic? Do we have the same problem because the active ingredients come from these plants?
Right. So here is the sort of fundamental issue, to boil it down. As consumers, we are at the mercy of the companies that are making the finished doses, right? So there's companies that make the active ingredients, some of which are contaminated with materials used in liquid rocket fuel production. And some of the companies are okay. But the ones that have the responsibility for testing those ingredients and formulating the finished product, we're at their mercy, essentially. We have to rely on the companies that we feel are the most responsible and ethical in testing, doing due diligence, and putting together those drugs. So, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that that company is ethical, that company is transparent, that company is putting patient lives ahead of profit, and if something goes horribly wrong, that you could sue that company. And that's where this overseas production gets very tricky. I mean, the Justice Department could barely bring Ranbaxy to heel for its conduct because it doesn't have jurisdiction, and so we're in a pretty tenuous situation relying on these overseas companies to make life-saving medicine for us.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical, Catherine, to be honest with you, about the when you talk about drug companies that are putting people's lives over profits. I have to concede that maybe I'm just a little bit cynical on that issue. All right, so let me ask you this: there's two questions. One, from a sort of like a consumer advice. That is, there must be sites where I can go and I can see sort of like the records of these drug companies or where this stuff is manufactured. That gives me the origins, and then I'd like you if you have information on that to tell us. But the second would be from a legislative perspective, from a policy perspective, which I think is far more important ultimately because not that many people are going to hear this, and that's the way that if you really want to impact it, it's got to happen through legislation. What are the best ways to deal with this? Because I know the VA sometimes produces generic drugs when there's shortages, as it is now, a government entity. Elizabeth Warren has a plan to do that. Should we just basically say, you know what, we're not going to leave it to India and China, their safety regimes to basically, provide medication to us? The government should do it, or what? So, go ahead.
Yeah. So first of all, I agree with you. We shouldn't leave it to India or China to make our essential medicines. If India gets pissed off and says they don't want to give us antibiotics, we're really hosed. I mean, at the moment, we make almost none of our own antibiotics.
Right.
So that's fundamentally a national security risk. Secondly, consumers right now have almost no way to know where their drugs are manufactured. I mean, you actually have to be an investigative journalist to figure it out, unfortunately. So we need laws changed, and there have to be laws changed to disclose the location, the manufacturer of the active ingredient, and the manufacturer location of the finished drug. That needs to happen, there is no question. So where does that leave consumers right now? One thing they need to do is they need to know the name of the manufacturer making their drugs, especially if they're on maintenance medication. That name is on the label, okay? And here's why that's important. Because say you take a drug month after month, week after week, you have to know, is that drug working? Do you have weird side effects? Is that drug having the effect it's supposed to, right? If it does, you want to stay on it. But the problem is you go back to the pharmacy and they may switch you to a different generic manufacturer. Right. They're just filling it with what they have on the shelf behind them. So you need to actually make a request to stay on the same manufacturer's drug. So that's number one. Number two, how do you check out those manufacturers? Well, one way is a good old-fashioned Google search. Type in FDA warning letter and the name of the manufacturer, and then, in fact, you can see what has the FDA found in these manufacturing plants of that company.
If the FDA has found something, if the FDA has found a problem, there's a problem, right? I mean, because,
yes.
right? I mean, like this is, some cop once told me, like, for every ticket that we give you, there's some algorithm where we know you have committed, 100 different traffic violations. So if the FDA is finding them, if the FDA flags them for a problem, they must have some real problems.
That is correct, because you know that there are plenty of companies where that have problems and the FDA is not finding it.
Right.
So you want to be taking a drug made by a relatively clean company. And that's one way to try to start to figure it out. But, I have to say, patients should also read my book because they will understand how this whole system is put together.
Okay, and so then from a legislative fix, a policy standpoint, we should probably be nationalizing at least the production of at least key drugs like antibiotics, it seems to me. But we should also, we need to do something on the policy front in a big way.
In a big way. And the other thing, frankly, that needs to be done, price regulation is part of this. One reason that we have been forced into the arms of these low-cost providers overseas is because nobody can afford to pay brand-name drug prices, right? So without meaningful price regulation, I think we will never get control of this. And the problem right now is that everybody is focused on the crisis of price, and it is a crisis. But what has been ignored in this is the crisis of quality, and there's a crisis there too. And you have to really consider these two things together.
Bottle of Lies, the inside story of the generic drug boom. Katherine Eban, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much, Sam.
All right, folks. We'll go to the fun half and talk about how our president is a criminal. How's that? Cheer things up a little bit.
Fun. I have on occasion bought modafinil from India online because I was prescribed it, but I couldn't afford to fill my prescription. And that interview makes me think it's the same stuff.
That you were buying? What do you mean? That
there's not a huge difference between the drugs that you buy through legal means and the ones you buy online.
Well, I think she was saying, part of it is that they're...
they could all be bad.
They could all be bad. But I think it makes sense, particularly if you're taking, drugs on a regular basis, to go and just see what that manufacturer is. It never even occurred to me that there could be variants as to, I'm getting the generic one. It turns out there's not a generic one. There's different generics, and yeah, great.
You want those generic-y generics.
Right. All right, folks. Going to head into the fun half. Just a reminder, you can support this program by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. We don't need any type of agency to determine the quality of our shows every day. I can tell you with 100% assuredness, the show is produced from the same manufacturing facility every single day. We are in close proximity to all of the podcast quality investigators. Whatever.
You can become clips from a place in India.
That's right. We do get the clips from a place in India. We have to outsource that. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, not only are you supporting the free show that you enjoy every day, twice a week, 3 times a week, once a week, but you're also going to get extra content every day. So check it out. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Also, JustCoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. One of our oldest advertiser, really a movement partner in many respects. Just talking to Brendan today about the Cernovich episode a year or two ago, and if it wasn't for Just Coffee, I would have been fried. They were very big. The fact that they are just they are allies, as Dave Rubin would never say. And also great coffee, and you get 10% off with the coupon code Majority, and you can get the Majority Report blend. Michael has taken a vow of silence for this week. So
I'd like to see that.
No TMBS. Well, you are, in a way. Haven't heard a word from him all day.
It's true.
So no TMBS, but you can go check out the YouTube channel. catch up on all the TMBSs that you missed.
He's missing out on Dave. Imagine you were at a silent meditation retreat and you found out somehow that Dave Rubin was going through a pronounced breakdown.
I mean, honestly, that would be like that's the test.
Like on day 2, you find that out.
It's like a 7-day fast, and all of a sudden, like on day 2 or 3, they like bring in like, oh, who left these donuts here? And Jamie, you have not taken a vow of silence.
Mm-mm.
And so, what has come of that?
So this week on the Antifada, we speak with Anna Merlin, author of Republic of Lies, American Conspiracy Theorists and Their Surprising Rise to Power. We talk all about conspiracy theories. What is it about the US of A that makes it such fertile ground for conspiratorial thinking, and why it's all capitalism's fault, and we will not be a less paranoid country until we are a fairer one. So check it out, folks. We also have, for our patrons, History is a Weapon, number 4, with Sean and Matt Chrisman from Chapo Trap House, where they do their incredible Galaxy Brain grad school dropout thing and talk about the 1970s and how they prefigured a lot of what we're seeing today in this crazy world.
Matt, you also have not taken a vow of celibacy.
No.
Or silence.
Neither of those.
Neither of those things.
Yeah, Literary Hangover, the Margaret Fuller episode.
Do you think there
now?
is a vow of celibacy at the vow of silence? I mean, it's who knows what
How can you get
happens
consent? You get nonverbal consent, I guess.
You're right.
Thumbs
No.
up.
Thumbs up.
Not.
That's the way-
There's all kinds of ways.
That's the way I do it.
Yeah, it's a normal consent procedure anyway.
Thumbs up, thumbs down. That's a classic. No? All
Check yes or no.
But yeah, check out Margaret Fuller, who gave thumbs up to her Emerson and Hawthorne, but neither of them was that into her. But she's a very interesting woman. She was early feminist and then sort of a socialist type of the Fourier, who was the utopian socialist before Marx. She was inspired by Fourier, who was like, the socialism he's why communists call themselves communists, because they want to distinguish themselves from those utopian socialists. So she was into those guys, though, and they were actually a little bit more interesting than Marx makes them out to be. But check that out. Literary Hangover is going to hit its year birthday in 2 days. And 5 away from 200 on patreon.com/literary hangover.
Oh, yeah. I need to listen to that. It sounds very relevant to my interests.
There is, I'm just going to say this once. I'm not, we're contemplating it. The upstairs offices are going over this proposal, but it was proposed that Suns Out, Guns Out as a mechanism in which to drive membership for the show, where what would take place would apparently be that if we get a certain amount of members, I will wear a, a muscle shirt? Tank top.
Or a tank top?
Tank top in the fun half for an entire week.
The tape will show. I don't know if we can find it, but I was actually the first person to go Suns Out, Guns Out on this show. I actually went Suns Out, Guns Out once,
Really?
and you guys gave me crap for it, and I used that exact phrase, actually.
Did you?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
You know, I often have my guns out, but I think it's different for women.
Well, there you go. Suns out, guns out. We may do that. But in the meantime, see you in the fun half.
For it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And And the alpha males are back, back, back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Danergy's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danergy.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder. I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
Psych. Fuck 'em. Fuck 'em.
Almost says what? Almost says what?
Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black African. And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Fuck 'em. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black.
Come on! Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total
Pussy.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Let's just continue on with the clips we have from Robert Mueller. There's two more clips. Here is Mueller saying, contrary to what some people argue, that there was no evidence that the Trump folk participated in a conspiracy to defraud the United States. That would have been the specific charge. Contrary to that assertion, Robert Mueller says there was insufficient evidence. We will get to possibly one of the reasons why there was insufficient. One of the reasons could be it didn't happen. So there wasn't enough evidence. There was some, but there wasn't enough evidence to cross the threshold of charging the president. But here's Robert Mueller.
Let me say a word about the report. The report has two parts, addressing the two main issues we were asked to investigate. The first volume of the report details numerous efforts emanating from Russia to influence the election. This volume includes a discussion of the Trump campaign's response to this activity, as well as our conclusion that there was insufficient evidence to charge a broader conspiracy.
Okay, insufficient evidence. Not no evidence, which he would have said if there was no evidence.
In other words, totally vindicated.
In other words, totally vindicated. Insufficient evidence to charge a broader conspiracy. And that's not just in regards to the president, because we already know that in regards to the president, he cannot bring any charges to that effect. But that means to all the people around him, except for those, of course, like the former campaign manager and the former consigliere who are in jail right now. Here is Robert Mueller speaking to the second half of his report, which is the question of obstruction. Mueller makes it quite clear that obstruction keeps investigators from finding the truth. Obstruction is subsidiary to the primary mission of the investigation, but it is specifically related to why maybe there was insufficient evidence to bring a conspiracy charge because of the obstruction. The idea that you need to be found guilty of an underlying crime to be charged with obstruction is absurd. It is absurd. And anyone who says anything differently knows it's absurd. They know that. They're lying to you, and it's sad in some instances.
Sad.
Yeah, super sad. Here is Robert Mueller speaking specifically about the obstruction.
The indictments allege, and the other activities in our report describe, efforts to interfere in our political system. They needed to be investigated and understood, and that is among the reasons why the Department of Justice established our office. That is also a reason we investigated efforts to obstruct the investigation. The matters we investigated were of paramount importance. It was critical for us to obtain full and accurate information from every person we questioned. When a subject of an investigation obstructs that investigation or lies to investigators, it strikes at the core of their government's effort to find the truth and hold wrongdoers accountable.
There you go. So it strikes at the core of those efforts. What Mueller delivered was basically a call to Congress to begin impeachment proceedings. Doesn't mean to actually vote to impeach. It means go over this material. It's all here in the report. Mueller says that he does not want to testify because the report speaks for itself. Frankly, I don't think Mueller gets to choose. A. B. I think there's value in bringing Robert Mueller in just to read the report to the committee, because this is a political process. This is a political process. You cannot just submit the report and anticipate that it's going to do all the work. Now, Congress needs to do the work, but part of that work is to put on basically an argument in front of the American people, because this is a political process. And if driving attention to the report, and I have said this multiple times, all you need to do is read the first 2 chapters. But 99% of the American public is not. I would say probably that may even be generous estimate. And the way to do impeachment is to convince the American public, at least some percentage of them. And the only way to do that is to expose them to what's in the report. And if there's a better way to do it than bringing the author of the report to talk about the report, then I'm not aware of it. I mean, I could have just told you everything about this book today, but I had the author on because I don't understand every dynamic in the book. She may have more passion. She may write the same amount of pages for one story to another, but one may be more important to her. I mean, this is fairly obvious. Robert Mueller does not get to choose whether he is used as a prop, frankly, or a mechanism to inform the American public what the president did. It's not his choice. And Robert Mueller has now gone in front of Congress, essentially in front of the American people, and basically said to Congress, it's your turn. I did my work. Well, that's fine. Congress may need him a little bit more. But then there's another guy who did this last night, I guess it was, or 2 nights ago. in Michigan, a Republican. Now, it's hard to know who was in this auditorium in Michigan. He's a Republican. Don't agree with him on much. Some things, though. I mean, he's one of those guys, I think probably on some of the national security issues I would agree with. It's hard to know who's in this facility in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But I saw one clip where at least one of the, he was a retired vet, fought in Vietnam, was commemorating, I guess it was 50 years, I think he said, that one of his buddies was killed on that day. And he said something to the effect of like, do we get a do-over on our vote for the president? Which suggests to me that at least some of them in there were voters of Donald Trump. Anyways, when Amash went into this room, he got a standing ovation for an extended period of time for calling for impeachment. And here he is making the case at a town hall.
I think it's really important that we do our job as a Congress, that we not allow misconduct to go undeterred, that we not just say someone can violate the public trust and that there are no consequences to it. And if you get a chance, I encourage you all to read the tweet where it lays all of this out. Mueller's report lays all of this out. And I'm confident that if you read Volume 2, you will be appalled at much of the conduct. And I was appalled by it. And that's why I stated what I stated. That's why I came to that conclusion, because I think we can't let conduct like that go unchecked. Congress has a duty to keep the president in check, and it is a difficult process for those who are worried about Congress intruding on the president's powers consistently. It is a difficult process to remove someone from office. It's not easy. So no one's suggesting that just because you start some inquiry or process that a person's removed from office. Nonetheless, we have a job to do. And I think we owe it to the American people to represent them, to ensure that the people we have in office are doing the right thing, are of good character, aren't violating the public trust.
I mean, if Nancy Pelosi can't figure out how to sell it to the American public, she just basically copy everything he just said.
But also, good luck with that as a Republican.
Well, yes. And we'll get to that in just a moment, actually. But, I mean, if Justin Amash can figure it out, if he can figure out how to be politically viable in this instance, there's no reason why the Democrats can't. And I mean, here he's laying out the path forward. I mean, it's getting, at one point, you hear a lot of assessments that I think are wrong anyways of what happened during the Clinton years. And I certainly understand why Donald Trump might think it's in his best interest to get impeached. He very well may be trying to get impeached. I don't know. It wouldn't be completely irrational of him to assume that it work out well. But the one thing that's definitively clear that was not the case during the Clinton impeachment is there was no cost for Republicans to not impeach. There is a building cost for Democrats to not impeach. This stuff is not going to go away. It's not going to go away. And to the extent that it does go away, it's only because Trump's going to do other horrible things that are going to make people like, why didn't we deal with this? Like, it's not like I'm just curious as to what the Democratic leadership thinks is going to happen between now and the 2020 election that is going to, I mean, if their plan works and Trump, does stuff that's horrible and hoists himself on his own petard, that's just going to remind everybody that the Democrats did not impeach him, did not even try to hold him to account. If Trump does, I don't know, like he does an infrastructure bill that everybody loves. I don't think that's going to happen, but how does that help the Democrats? Like there is no, it is sort of fascinating that I understand wanting to capture the moment, but the election is not tomorrow. The election is in 18 months. And sometimes like you wish that everybody's sentiments that exist today, you could freeze them in amber and show up at November 6th or wherever it is, 2020. But that's just not the way it works.
If we could just bottle the feeling that everybody had about Hillary when she was looking at her phone on Air Force One in 2012.
Yeah, exactly.
They're so bad at this.
Here is Justin Amash, one having to explain to a MAGA hat wearing constituent that, pretend like things aren't as tribal as they are in some ways. And Justin Amash is in a tough position here because he's going to argue that his bona fides as a Republican, as being, or a conservative, as being, fiscally prudent or, pro-austerity or et cetera, et cetera. The problem is that like there's nobody else in his ideological bent that is actually pursuing any of that. I mean, I remember back during the Iraq War when Andrew Sullivan would refer to himself, or that era, that Bush era, as a conservative, and it was like, it's like someone going around speaking Latin and just wondering why no one understands. Like that is a dead language, and there are people who go and speak Latin, but they're usually like in churches. And there's it's ceremonial. That's sort of like when I see Justin Amash say what he's going to say here, that's what it feels like to me. He's speaking Latin in some type of ceremonial ceremony.
I'm just trying to get my viewpoint across because nobody else has asked a question. Anyway, my question is...
Pause it. Now, this is a room full of Michiganders. Now, maybe they're all Democrat, but this is a big auditorium. It is packed to the gill. I look at this thing. It's tough to see, exactly, but it doesn't look to me like this is not a bunch of college kids. And this looks about as Grand Rapids, Michigan as it gets. Now, maybe all the Trump haters came out, but I don't think so. But they seem to really have a problem with this MAGA hat wearing, I think, a woman right here. But go ahead.
Anyway, my question is, how can we become a Democrat when we voted for you as a Republican? Because you just drank the same Kool-Aid as all the Democrats.
Okay, so let's keep the mic there because I might have some follow-up I want to ask. But first, I have one of the most constitutionally conservative and fiscally conservative voting records in the whole Congress. And in fact, I have voted to spend less than any member of Congress in either chamber since I've been in Congress. So I voted for less spending. When I got elected as part of the Tea Party movement, people cared about limited government. They cared about fiscal conservatism, making sure that our government wasn't spending too much. Under the current administration, spending is skyrocketing. So spending has gone way up. And Republicans, unfortunately, haven't said that much about it. And I've continued to vote to reduce spending at the federal level. I talked earlier about how I think we do too many things at the federal level. And I agree. If you look at my scorecards from conservative groups, I'm at the top of like nearly all the scorecards. So you're not going to find me. I'm not like even a middle of the road Republican when it comes to these scorecards. I'm at the top or near the top of every scorecard. So
it's like golf.
I haven't changed. I'm who I said I was. I'm a principled, constitutional conservative who has stayed consistent regardless of whether we have President Obama in office or President Trump. Now, I heard your comments about the Mueller report, but you haven't stated any facts. What are the facts you're disputing? I tweeted.
I mean, it's fascinating, right? I mean, it's fascinating because the distance between him and the rest of the Republican Party. Now, it's also sort of just bizarre to see someone sort of like, I have consistently been on the side that says we must create more deprivation, we must immiserate more people. We must adhere to what basically amounts to a religion that is based on faith and has nothing to do with real world results. And I have stayed true to those principles. and that's weird. And then also to hear the MAGA hat wearing person going like, yes, absolutely. I was part of that Tea Party thing. Yes, absolutely. All that stuff. But because you're against the president who is doing everything contrary to why I voted for you, I now perceive you as being the enemy. Like it's like there's a snake eating its tail quality to this, but then you need a snake eating its tail.
It's crazy that the Tea Party people are now like the moderate conservatives somehow.
It was the same thing with, weren't Flake and Sass both, or at least one of them was Tea Party?
Yep.
Like it kind of speaks. I mean, we've never had like one class in one party and one class in the other party in this country quite. But like it used to be more that Republicans were like, you know, the ruling class, the bosses, they're for the rich and austerity and fiscal responsibility or whatever. And the Democrats were more not a labor party, but labor was certainly a strong constituency in it. And now, like, I mean, they talked about this in History as a Weapon. Like it was really prefigured in the 70s by Nixon, but like this kind of aggrievement has zero links to class anymore. It's just on another level.
It's on another level. I agree. I think on some level it's zero sum, that aggrievement. But be that it may, since we're talking about aggrievement, let's shift, shall we? Well, let's just talk about Mitch McConnell first for a moment, because this is important. So as you know, Mitch McConnell, and I think this is probably one of the most undersold reasons why Donald Trump is in office. Mitch McConnell refused to provide a hearing for Barack Obama's Supreme Court justice pick, Merrick Garland. I think McConnell's was aided and abetted by Barack Obama's failure on a political level to deal with what McConnell was doing. Barack Obama was quite skilled at getting elected. From a legislative perspective, not so much. The ACA was a huge accomplishment. It is true. But there was a massive call for insurance reform in this country. They got about as tepid a version as you could get in terms of the parties that were brought together. They saved the private medical insurance industry, which was facing an explosion, I think, of a demographic nightmare in terms of the baby boomers, and it was enhanced by providing them with about 10 million new customers subsidized by the government. I mean, that's basically what happened. The expansion of Medicaid, a good thing. But in terms of like the politics of this, Barack Obama failed. Mitch McConnell succeeded, and he got super lucky as well. But not only did Mitch McConnell get to seat a right-wing justice in that seat. He didn't just get lucky in doing that. He created some of that luck. Here he is back in 2016 insisting that you cannot seat a Supreme Court justice or even have a hearing for one in an election year when Barack Obama wasn't even running.
The decision the Senate announced weeks ago remains about a principle and not a person. The Senate will appropriately revisit the matter when it considers the qualifications of the nominee the next president nominates, whoever that might be.
There you go. So that was him back in 2016, where March 2016, reiterating the principle that he had stated in February, that we were not going to seat a new Supreme Court justice. Here he is yesterday in Paducah, Kentucky. Asked if a Supreme Court justice was to die next year, what would you do?
If the Supreme Court justice was to die next year, what would you do? We'd fill it.
There you go. He's laughing. He knows.
I would do my job. What are you talking about?
He just knows, like, yeah, mofos. Of course. I'm sorry. Oh, when I said principle, did you guys believe me? That is hilarious. Right. Right. There it is. There's the example of once Donald Trump is gone. But Biden's still a notion that the Republicans' fever will break. Will only happen after Trump is gone. See, and so Trump will still be there. So he's still under the spell. Yeah. Darkest before the dawn.
You gotta hand it to him, though. He's pretty good at it.
Mitch McConnell, if he wasn't so turtleish-y looking, would be a great evil villain character. He just comes off as a little bit. You'd have to put him up. The storyline would have to be like the guy who got picked on in school quite a bit.
He's too cute.
Yeah.
It's like, really, this guy? This guy's the one who's dooming democracy?
Maybe he could get like a really scary looking suit or something.
Let's play this next clip. This is a weatherman. He's where is this guy from? From Ohio. I don't blame him. He's a little frustrated. Sort of silly, though. I mean, he's on the weather. Apparently, they're interrupting the weather broadcast to give a tornado warning. You know, sometimes folks, when they read the Twitter comments, they get a little bit too upset.
This heavy rain is between you and the tornado. That's why this is a dangerous situation tonight. It's dark. It's also rainy. I was just checking social media. We have viewers complaining already. Just go back to the show. No, we're not going back to the show, folks. This is a dangerous situation, okay? It's nice rain. Think about this. This was your neighborhood. I'm sick and tired of people complaining about this. Our job here is to keep people safe, and that is what we're going to do. Some of you complain that this is all about my ego. Stop. Okay, just stop right now. It's not. I'm done with you people. I really am. This is pathetic. Dangerous situation here. All right, I'm sorry I did that. It just really bothers me that we have people that don't care about other people's safety around here. That's just ridiculous. New tornado warning here. That's the same one we had. That's headed towards central and southern Mercer County.
You know, and I can understand the guy's frustration. I mean, he's doing something that is legitimate, has a legitimate benefit to people, and is about a public safety, and he's upset about getting a little bit of Twitter hate. Now, that, to me, as funny as it was, makes some sense. This doesn't make any sense, because Dave Rubin is not saving anybody's life. Dave Rubin is not doing a public service. Dave Rubin rails against the idea that people always want to be a victim class.
Hey, we're having an ideas emergency over here.
Exactly. But I mean, Dave Rubin always talks about how offensive it is that people would consider themselves based upon their victimhood. If Dave Rubin got rid of his sense of being victimized, all that would be left would be the scruffy beard that he's trying to grow. Here he is walking the streets complaining about an article in the Quillette. Now, Matt, I'm not terribly familiar with Quillette. I know we've talked about it here a little bit. How would you characterize Quillette? Is this a left-wing magazine?
No, it's sort of the IDW's sort of magazine.
I see. So it's the IDW's.
Yeah, but of late, they've been critical of Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson.
Well, isn't that the point of the IDW, right? Right? Ideas. Not tribal. Not about victimhood. Here's Dave Rubin taking a walk to clear his head now that he's been criticized. And very upset that none of his friends have contacted him. This is sort of sad.
On everybody. Okay, so first off, all right, wow, we got over 400 already. Jeez, this thing's flying. Okay, cool. So first off, I would just like to say I'm having a perfectly lovely day, despite what you might be seeing on Twitter. I just got my hair cut.
I'm not mad.
I'm having a protein shake. It's a mint chocolate something. It's really good. Whey protein, really nice. Don't want to get hit by a car while...
Let me just tell you something about when I'm having a really good day. When I'm having a really good day, let me tell you what I don't do. Go on and do a streaming video for 12 minutes talking about everybody's being mean to me. Go ahead.
Good. Whey protein, really nice. Don't want to get hit by a car while I'm walking here.
You sure about that?
And, you know, I got into some Twitter nonsense this morning, and it's so, it's just gross. It's all just gross. So for those of you that aren't playing along on Twitter, God bless you, and you're probably living your best life. But basically, Quillette, which is run by Claire Lehman, who's a former guest of mine, who has been very friendly and nice to me on my show.
What does a former guest mean? Oh, he's not going to have her back on?
I think that's the implication.
So much about ideas. Okay, good.
In all of our private exchanges, has done about 4 hit pieces on me recently, where they're really trying to single me out of the IDW crew, that I'm somehow the worst because I sit down and talk to some people that they don't like, and I talk to these people on the right, and I don't question them exactly as they want, and all of these things. And they keep just writing piece after piece. Now, I got a shit ton of haters these days, which really is just the sign that I'm doing something good. I mean...
You know, I got news for you. Just because people don't like you does not mean you're doing something good. Sometimes people just don't like you.
I'm going to apply this to ISIS.
Right. Exactly. And, you know, a lot of people complain about ISIS.
From all sides.
That's from all sides. Yeah, I must be doing something right. Good.
It really is. Like, I'm happy with what I'm doing. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people seem to enjoy what I'm doing. I have no guilt related to what I'm doing. I'm living my life and doing my thing. I don't wander around worrying about destroying people and hating people and all of this nonsense. So anyway, Quillette went after me again a couple of days ago. This one was by a former guest of mine, which is interesting. So this one, it's not only that it's in Quillette, which Claire Lehman, who's a former guest of mine, who's a guest after I've had people like Molyneux and Cernovich and Paul Joseph Watson and whoever, and Lauren Southern and whoever else they're going for me on. I'm walking up a major hill.
I'll just say, to defend Dave, they could have mentioned it when they were on with Dave.
That's right. That's right. Interesting. I mean, usually the idea that they were a guest would be that
They're not
it gives them a
leftists.
little bit more credibility. Yeah. Right? Like, but go ahead.
Right here, so if I start running out of breath, you'll know why. Anyway, this guest, though, was Kathy Young, who's a writer I had on the show, I don't know, about 3 years ago or something. And there's so many things I could say about her personally from my experience with her, but I'm not going to do any of that. And there might be a couple moments on Twitter this morning where I slightly took the low road, and I apologize not to her. I apologize to myself and to you guys if I did do that. I'm not perfect.
Positive. I also want to apologize to myself if I am saying anything that is in any way, rude towards Dave Rubin. I want to apologize to me.
And there's a lot of things you could be saying, too, but you're not going to say them.
There's a lot of things I could be saying. I'm not going to say that. But if I do, and if I have, I want to apologize to me.
You get caught in this nonsense. But I just want to be clear about something. I have no guilt on my conscience of anyone I've talked to or any question I've asked or not asked. Have I made...
That's the second time he said no
every
guilt.
interview absolutely perfect? Of course not. I'm not a perfect human being. And these people who are just endless haters, it's like, what are you doing with your lives? But in any event, what's going on...
I guess he was addressing that to me. I'm just doing the show. Raising my kids, doing the show. Good.
Endless haters, it's like, what are you doing with your lives? But in any event, what's going on here really is that, and this is the goddamn truth. This is the truth, the truth, the truth.
The truth.
I have left the left and survived. And I've been calling out the left as a progressive, as a liberal for years. For years and years, I was doing it. Nice, we got over 1,000 people in here. That's awesome.
Sweet.
For years and years, I was doing it. I was doing it from the left. I was saying, guys, let's stop calling everyone racist. Let's stop calling everyone a bigot. Let's make sound arguments. All of these things. Not everyone
the garbage truck is not
who's against gay
metaphorical.
marriage the second you turn for gay marriage is a homophobe, unless Barack Obama was a homophobe the first time he ran for president, as well as Hillary Clinton. Trump is not a Nazi, and the people that vote for him are not Nazis, and he's not Hitler. And the more that you guys do these types of things, instead of making sound arguments, the more that you're going to... man, I got to get off this hill. The more that you're going to pin yourself into an intellectual corner.
This is not the hill you
and
want
what's
to die
happening
on.
is, I kept making warnings to the left. People started paying attention to it. All the things that I've been saying for years have now burst forth for everyone to see. The left has gone completely fucking bananas. And
pause it. So Quillette is the left now.
Yep.
Anybody who disagrees with him is the left.
Quillette's basically Jacobin from Australia.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
People that you can leave the left and you will survive. You're going to be okay, but that's not even it. What it really is about is I go to college campuses and sell out comedy clubs, and I was on tour for a year with Jordan Peterson, and I met literally thousands and thousands of good conservatives who can agree to disagree, who I tell them that I'm gay married, they don't care, or they just are willing to live in the same society as me.
Nice of
I tell them
so sweet.
that I'm begrudgingly pro-choice, which is a really hard one for conservatives to swallow, but they can agree to have a conversation about it. I'm against the death penalty. Most conservatives aren't. I mean, all of this shit that I repeatedly...
he, back then, when a couple of years ago, when he interviewed these people, also would say he was for single-payer health insurance and limited government. Fascinating. Them begrudgingly for single-payer health insurance. Good.
Say over and over. And I don't get any hate from anyone on the right. And this whole idea, and all of these Quillette hippies, is the idea is if you build bridges to the right, that somehow is bad and awful, even though most of the IDW crew are on, I don't know if they really, what they think personally anymore, but are, or at least were, on the left at one point, right? So the fact that I've escaped, they have to take out an extremely high cost on me because they can't have you knowing that you can escape, but you can escape. It's your fucking life. Do whatever the hell you want to do with your...
Imagine the delusion here. Imagine the delusion here.
He really should have got his talking points together a bit more before he went on Periscope.
I sort of feel like the Quillette thing is trying to prove that you can't leave the left is a weird talking point, boy. All right, continue.
I always wanted to know what it was like to, for instance, put a fatwa on Salman Rushdie. And I feel like that's what we're doing with Dave Rubin right now.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Life. You live your life as you want. So it's like they're trying to take me out right now, and
take him out.
You guys won't do it. You won't do it. I'm going to keep doing what I think is right, and I'll talk to the people that I want to talk to that are interesting, and some of them are going to be shady every now and again.
Pause it.
And
you're going to talk to shady people? I mean, you could talk to shady people, but why don't you call them out on their shadiness? The bad thing is not so much that he's talking. I mean, I don't know that I would do it, but certainly there are people who talk to shady people, and one of the first questions are like, why are you so shady? Or, hey, don't you think this is shady? Or, here's what I'm going to talk about your shadiness. But that doesn't seem to come up.
Yeah, Dave instead says, we're part of the new center, aren't we?
Right, exactly. You're so shady. We're both basking in the shade. Go ahead.
Do it. I'm going to keep doing what I think is right. And I'll talk to the people that I want to talk to that are interesting. And some of them are going to be shady every now and again. And I suspect that the people that are always coming after me have done some pretty shady shit and childish shit.
Pause it.
And
I feel like I'm doing pretty childish shit right now, actually. Okay.
Childish shit. And anyway, it's just kind of boring more than anything else. So what's unfortunate about this one is that Kathy was on my show, and it was after Cernovich was on. She never said a word to me. And as I said, Claire was on my show after all of them were on my show. She never said a word to me either. And it's like, all right, you guys, you want to use me? Okay, we could play that game, I suppose. But you won't own me. Maybe you use me, but you won't own me. So anyway, so it's just boring, petulant, childish nonsense. And, you know, I know maybe I should have let some of it go this morning. And it's another beautiful day in Los Angeles, as it usually is. And I probably should have just let it go. But you got to defend yourself. You know, this mob rule that we live through is really weird.
Pause it. Is there a mob behind him, or the mob rule? You know, Quillette. What is it, the mob? Is he saying
they're coming? They're
wait,
coming.
is he saying it's mafia?
Ooh,
maybe that's
He's
what's
gonna
going
get
on.
whacked.
Oh,
Quillette is some type of money laundering enterprise for the mob. That's weird. Good.
You don't defend yourself. Why would someone else defend you? You know what I mean? So sometimes you got to do something that you don't inherently want to do. And I won't bow to the principle that in those interviews I could have done this or that different. I've acknowledged that repeatedly. But she's trying to take me out. You will not take me out. I'm not going anywhere. If anything, in a weird way, I feel bizarrely empowered right now, except for the fact that I'm walking down the street talking into my phone like a schmuck. I feel pretty bizarrely empowered right now because, you know, most of my haters are just YouTube losers that want to get clicks off me, right? And it's weird to be that person. Like, I wake up, I have no hate for anybody. I wake up and I try to do my day, and then whatever. I don't wake up and be like, what did this person say? I'm going to make a video about that person. Okay. But I get a lot of these haters.
All right, pause it. I just want to say it's long. I want to say that I don't do that in my own defense, because I think he may be talking about me in some respect.
Yeah.
In my own defense, I never wake up and say, what did Dave Rubin say today?
Yeah.
I don't do that. What I do is I wake up, make breakfast for the kids, make them lunch, walk down to work, and then I walk into the office and I go, Brendan, what did Dave Rubin do today?
Yeah, I was going to say, that's why you have producers.
That's exactly right. Good.
It's all right. That's fine. And by the way, I'm not talking about legitimate criticism, which I acknowledge all the time. If I had this person on, and should I have asked this question or that question, or if I focus too much on the left, although there's plenty of proof as today is why I do it. I'm just talking about the endless trolls and haters that just want clicks and clout and all that nonsense.
Clout chasers.
It's a load of nonsense. It's all just drivel, but you have to defend yourself. And I do have to say something else, which is, it's been really interesting today seeing who has publicly defended me and who will only privately message me. Because I'm getting texts from people that won't defend me publicly. I don't know where the whole IDW crew has been on this. I haven't really heard from anybody. And that's all right. People are busy. Not everyone's just spending all their day in the Twitter sphere, thank God. But I've been getting a lot of texts from people, and then a certain set of people are defending me publicly, and it's appreciated, because in these weird moments you kind of figure out who your friends are. And I say friends, not allies. I hate that word allies. They're always like, oh, that person's a gay ally, like we're going to war. You got a weapon? What do you got? Like, no, I hate the phrase ally. It's so stupid. But
there was a mob after him.
Then he name checks some people who actually would. Actually, we should play that part.
Yeah, this is.
He's about to pull a real Michael Tracy.
This part's a little bit sad.
Friends. So Bridget Fedezi today, and Art Tavana, and Colin Moriarty, Yasmin Mohammed. I'm sure I'm forgetting some big time people. David Raboy.
Big timers.
I think we can leave it there.
I'm starting to feel bad for him. Is he crying?
I think there's a reason why he's wearing those mirrored sunglasses, and sometimes you wear those. Now, what was also sort of amazing, after Dave Rubin went on his extended sort of walk, I mean, it was fascinating because it was in the bright sunlight, his long walk through his neighborhood, but in many ways he was walking through the darkness. And he said that he would more than likely invite more shady people onto his show. And he had talked about in there how the IDW crew hasn't seemed to even reach out, even in private, to say, hey, solidarity, David. And I want to make it clear. Yesterday on this program and in a tweet, I reached out to David and I said solidarity. And if you wanted to talk about it, I will give you a platform to talk about it. Now, I don't have 1 million subscribers. We have almost like 550 or something like that. And then we, the podcast as well. So, we're not quite 1 million, but close. And I'd give you an opportunity, David, to defend yourself against this left-wing rag Quillette. But instead, what David does apparently is choose to reach out to Milo Yiannopoulos. And
I haven't heard that name in a while.
It's true. And sometimes, folks, you can't go back. Sometimes those bridges gets burned. And so here is an exchange that Milo put on, I guess, what is it?
Telegram or something?
Telegram or something like that. Milo writes, total coincidence that the day I post about him weepishly here, I think it was waspishly, excuse me, was it, was this on Telegram or was this on like Gab or something else? Or what else was it?
He posted this on, I think, Telegram or Gab or something like that.
Oh, you can go public on Telegram like that?
He just printed it out and put it up around places.
Okay, well, So total coincidence. The day I post about him waspishly here, Dave Rubin texts me after 2 years.
Maybe he was still in recovery mode for those 2 years.
Of pretending I don't exist. And 7:40 p.m. Now, here's the question. Where is Milo? Is he in New York? Is he on the East Coast? I don't know. It's tough to know. But I suspect this was after Dave took that walk and realized he had no more friends. And he wrote, "This still your number?"
I'll do Milo. What do you want?
That is very waspishly of you, too. Your interview with JP was good, that's all.
I was nothing but loyal, helpful, and supportive to you since the day we met, but you threw me to the wolves and did nothing to defend me when they came for me over total bullshit. Then you had the chutzpah to publicly gloat about my irrelevance. So why are you texting me now? Feeling the heat, are we? They are coming for you. I won't waste energy trying to sabotage or harm you, but I sure am going to savor the spectacle. Go to hell, Dave.
Wow. I love the part too. That's like he borrows that phrase, when they came for me, you did nothing. Yeah. I'm not even sure what you're talking about. I watched the interview this weekend and thought it was excellent. That's all. Okay, then.
Bye, Dave. You deserve every bit of what's coming your way.
Oh, hell yeah.
Wow.
I love Dave saying, I'm not even sure what you're talking about. I just watched the interview. There's nothing else going on in my life that's making me reach
total
out.
Coincidence that I'm having to take a walk around the block. And
they say you got to be nice to people on your way up because you're going to see them on your way to wherever alt-right grifters go when they get canceled.
Now, here is a tweet by Eric Weinstein. He is of the Weinstein brothers, not the one that was just went to, I think, to going to jail or something like that. Harvey Weinstein, not that one.
Different one, yep.
Different one. This guy, is this the guy who was the professor?
No, I think that's Brett. So this is the guy who's
works for Peter Thiel.
Yeah, managing director at Thiel Capital. So he might be the leftist for Dave.
It's hard to keep all the shitty Weinstein straight.
So Eric Weinstein says there's something very odd and perhaps new happening around Dave Rubin. Rubin report. We could call it hate blinding, in analogy to being left snowblind. There is now a perma swarm of hater accounts that harass Dave constantly, seemingly to get him to become desensitized to all criticism. This is a bizarre construction, but let's just stay with the hate blinding. He's getting hate. Now, Dave Rubin, of course, has promoted in various different ways between his guests and I think his own commentary the idea that there's no hate speech, right? You shouldn't play the victim. Here is the hate blinding that is coming. that he screen grabs from Twitter. It is a Twitter guy, Hassan JF. I don't know how many followers he has, but he says, everybody spam, quote, debate Sam Seder, end quote, into the chat and send super chats.
That is not spam, by the way.
As
Spam
Lauren
is like an ad.
Yes, exactly. As Lauren Chen is interviewing the Rubin Report. I guess this was 6 days ago this happened. And the latest, this is on, 2 weeks ago, there is 4 different people. Take that universe. Oh, no, take that universe. Scroll down.
Looks like one guy.
One guy. Okay. And here's more. Okay, yeah. 2 of the people are the same person who wrote that, and then 2 other people who wrote debate Sam Seder, you coward. So that's the blinding amount of hate.
The perma-swarm.
The perma-swarm around Dave Rubin. That's real hate, folks. This other stuff, like the bigotry and whatnot, that's not real hate. And then he goes on to say, Eric Weinstein, since I hold to believe a reasonable, limited, and warranted critique of the Rubin Report, Dave has asked me if I could come on a show to discuss what the heck is going on from the perspective of a good faith leftish critique of Rubin Report guests, questions, balance, and effect. I'm going to have on a regular guest. Yeah.
Literally a guy who was involved in the conversation that he referenced when he said my brain was still in recovery mode from taking in too many high-level important ideas.
Literally a guy who's never been on any other show to discuss this stuff except for the Rubin Report. I don't know if we'll do it, but we're talking about it. It certainly doesn't make sense to have to wade through a daily miasma of hate to get constructive criticism.
It's a miasma of perma-swarm.
So the argument is what's happening is that this perma-swarm of hater accounts, which is responded to afterwards, and this perma-swarm of hater accounts, apparently the idea is to get Dave desensitized to legitimate criticism so that he is completely in the dark as to how to get better at whatever he does.
Or maybe we're doing it for his own good so he doesn't get his feelings hurt anymore.
That's another thing it could be.
I'm trying to sensitize Dave. I'm not trying to desensitize Dave.
Well, that is one-dimensional chess thinking. But this dude is like 18-dimensional chess thinking and on your behalf. Pretty impressive stuff. Pretty impressive stuff.
I can't find the good faith critique in all the noise to signal.
Oh,
he literally said,
That's exactly what
I'm
it
not
is.
owned.
Oh my gosh.
Like, just friggin' shrink and transform into a corn cob already, Dave. Come on.
All right, we had to do that extended report.
Anyway,
Maybe
I
we'll
hope
cut
you're all
that.
having a nice day. It's a beautiful day out here.
Oh gosh.
Well, you know what Kanye said, Dave. Your haters are your biggest fans, so solidarity.
Hang in there, bud. Calling from a 510 area code. Who's this? Thanks for holding for so very long.
Sam, what up, man? How you living, Sam?
I'm living my best life.
Oh, you living your best life? That's what's up, Sam. Well, you know, my name is Cole James Cash. I now am the host of GNN Channel 10, also known as Ghetto News Network, man. I got my own show now, Sam.
Congratulations.
You know, well, thank you, Sam. I took your advice. You know, I started my own joint. You know, we got 65 patrons in 3 months. Matt is a patron. You feel me?
That's true.
Nice.
You know, if I get 100, Sam, you know what's gonna happen?
Sun's out, guns out.
Nah, man, I'm not Reagan, man. That's my boy, but I'm not Reagan.
Okay,
what's
what
gonna
is it?
happen is I will co-host TMBS in studio, man.
Oh, ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm okay
No,
with that.
no, you won't like it, Sam.
Oh.
You will not like it. You know why?
No.
Because if I come through Friday morning, you're gonna come through, man. I'm gonna be passed out, 40 ounces all over the place, condom wrappers, strippers. You'll be like, what the hell happened up in here, man?
It'll be
We
Wednesday.
didn't even have no show, man. It was just a big party.
That you're going to be there for 3 days because TMBS is on Tuesday nights.
But it's on Thursday night also?
No. Ooh.
why
We
do I
won't
always
tell
listen on
Michael.
Thursday,
we
man?
won't tell Michael that you did not know that.
You know what, man?
What?
That's my fault, man.
No, it's all right.
You know what though? Hold
We
on.
don't need
Before
to
I
tell
get
him
to my
anything.
call,
Yeah.
Matt, do you remember when we was kicking in the theater, right? And I was like, "Yo, why you got that Blazers hat on, man?"
Right.
And what'd you say, Matt?
Oh, I don't remember. What did I say? I like Damian Lillard, and
You said, yeah, exactly. Where is his ass right now?
I don't know, probably recording some music.
Who's laughing now, Matt? He's laughing now. You and Reagan running your mouth, man.
Yeah.
That's right. Sorry, I had to say something about that. Now, Sam.
Yep.
I need you. I need you to do something, man. I need you to do something for the streets, Sam. I need you to do something for the hood.
All right.
You know.
What do you need?
Can you do that for me? Now, Sam, I know you're familiar with WorldstarHipHop.com, Sam.
Of course. Worldstar, yes.
Absolutely. Good. So, Sam, it's like, man, I be seeing you, Sam. I be seeing you on Twitter. Sometimes I paraphrase you on Twitter, okay? And I
paraphrasing
because sometimes
is
I wish,
like
man,
one of the highest forms of flattery. So,
absolutely. Now, what I need you to do, Sam, is like, man, you need to really flex on your enemies, man. Not your enemies. You should flex on people with different ideas. You need to do that, man. You need to look into the camera, Sam, and Matt, he gonna impose the World Star watermark. You need to look in the camera and really let them know what time it is, man. Sam, you need to, you know what I'm saying? Let them know you perform like Mike. Anyone, Cernovich, Tracy, Jordan, Jackson, Action, Pack Guns, ridiculous. You got to flex on them, Sam. Let them know you pull up solo if you got to. You don't even need your click. You'll go to MSNBC, any show. Let them know you're a boss in every show, any podcast. Let them know, Sam. Look in the camera and let them know.
well, I think I totally agree with Cole James Cass here. So, how's that?
We're gonna work on flexing.
Yeah, I'm working. I'm building up to super flexing. Right now, I'm just sort of like, like tremoring, not full on flex. Well, but I've got to save it for the Suns Out, Guns Out. I got to save it for the Suns Out, Guns Out.
Oh, we know. Sam, we already know you got the same guns Rambo had. We talked about that, man.
Yep.
Yep. Anybody could get it, Sam. I'm very proud of you. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
I'm very proud of
it.
you. And you can reach me at patreon.com/GNN Channel 10. We need 35 more. Sam, thank you for flexing on them. Put that World Star watermark. It was good. All right, y'all.
Check it out, folks. There you go.
Hell yeah.
Can you stream to World Star yet?
Can we directly?
Yeah, we should submit that Dave Rubin segment we just did.
Whenever I come home, Saul just charges at me with both his fists out and yells "World Star." That's basically it.
He's learned well from the internet.
Exactly. Calling from an 808 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, what's going on? Can you hear me?
Yep. Who's this?
Awesome. My name is Camilo. I'm calling in from New Jersey.
Nice to meet you, Camilo. What's on your mind?
Nice to talk to you. So recently, I've heard a couple callers call in saying that they're veterans. The one gentleman called in about agriculture, and he was hesitant to accept socialism. And another gentleman called in, an older guy, and saying that he was kind of scared of when Jamie talks about communism. And I'm calling as a Marine veteran myself. I served for 4 years, and I just want to say to anybody who's listening, because obviously veterans are listening, just dive in. Just dive into leftism. One thing I've noticed is that leftism has really opened my eyes to, I guess, the greater good of civilians. And sorry, I'm a little nervous. I'm going to slow down.
You're doing great.
But awesome. Thank you. But, really appreciate you guys. You guys have opened my eyes to everything. There's a lot of toxicity. There's another thing I want to touch on. There's a lot of toxicity within the military community. Looking up to guys like James Mattis, accepting some of Trump's rhetoric just because he says it once in a while that he likes the military or whatever, even though his policy is sending troops overseas every day, but that's a whole nother thing. But I guess just wanted to toss the ball in your guys' field now. Left is best. I don't know what else to say about that.
All right. Well, appreciate the call, man. Thanks so much.
Awesome.
That's good advice.
Awesome. Thank you.
Have you ever listened to Eyes Left? Oh, is he gone?
Yep.
Oh, well,
I think.
Good podcast.
Wait,
I'm still here.
Oh, you're still here. Okay, good.
If you're in the military
Yeah.
or ex-military, is Eyes Left from Spencer Rapone, who you may know as the guy who got kicked out of the army for writing "Communism Will Win" on his cap at his West Point graduation ceremony.
Didn't you have him on your show?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've learned a lot,
Cool.
a lot about our all the conflicts we're currently in that I barely even knew about from listening to his show.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
All right, appreciate the call. Yeah, it is a little bit. Calling from an 832 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, this is Ryan again, calling from Texas.
Ryan from Texas. What's on your mind, Ryan?
So you pretty much covered all but one of my points that I was going to make by lambasting my opinions on air, but so I wanted to clarify one of my points yesterday because I didn't adequately explain it. So I mentioned the historic control of the historic control of the House of Representatives, because I thought if the Democrats didn't win the election, they could just proceed with impeachment then. However, after hearing your arguments, you made the point that it would be almost hypocritical to not be adhering to the Constitution to basically proceed with impeachment now. However, I realized that I don't really care that if it looks hypocritical or if it's a blatant power move, because I think the Republicans have created this environment of cutthroatness, like how you were talking about how the Republicans' fevers won't break. And so I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
All right, Ryan, well, you have to just remind me, I rarely make an argument about hypocrisy. What you're saying that I said?
Oh, not necessarily hypocrisy, just not adhering to the Constitution.
What do you mean by not impeaching now or by impeaching later?
By not, because you laid out the argument that we should impeach now.
Yeah.
Didn't you just now earlier?
Well, I mean, look. First off, if you don't impeach now, how do you because it's a political thing, right? I mean, it becomes theoretically a little bit harder to do later, right? Because there would have to be new things that would lead to impeachment to sell it to the American public. But I'm not 100% sure I know what the point you're trying to make is.
My point is that it would look partisan to do impeachment after the elections, but I don't really care if it looks partisan, because I think the environment that the Republicans created.
Yeah, I don't care either about that. I mean, I just think that you do it now ultimately because I think particularly in the wake of the Mueller report and in wake of all the obstruction that has gone on in the wake of the Mueller report, in addition to the obstruction that went on beforehand, I think there's a real cost to not impeaching. That's basically what that's my argument.
No, I forgot to preface it with I've come around to the idea of impeachment. I'm not the problem I see with me living in a red state is that I can't say that in my college, because if I say that in my college, it would invite bad actors to with strong opinions that would then further that narrative that they're going to take down Donald Trump.
I see what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah, there's no reason to get people who are asleep, no reason to wake up anybody. If there can be some, on some level, though, that's an argument that it's going to drive out the vote. But, I got news for you. Texas, I don't think they're quite there yet in terms of turning Texas. But appreciate the call, Ryan.
No problem. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, we don't have too much time left. I know we have people holding for a long time. Calling from a 347 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
It's Ali from Astoria.
Ali, what's going on?
I just want to say it's been I don't know how many hours since the Mueller press conference happened, but we still haven't heard anything from Pelosi or Schumer yet.
My understanding is there was a good
Trump,
there was a good that what's his face Nadler was good, but I haven't seen it obviously, but I've heard that his response was pretty good.
it was good. I think on Twitter he said he's going to do a press conference later today about it.
I think he did,
but
I'm not
but
sure.
nothing from. Oh, okay. It's been a little while since I checked. But Trump's been out there. The Trump campaign's been out there. The press secretary has been out there. I guarantee you, like the Fox News evening shows are going to run with Mueller retiring rather than anything else. He said, I'm just flabbergasted that Democrats are not trying to change the narrative at all about this.
Well, I suspect we're going to read in the next day or two about accounts of maybe a Democratic caucus meeting where you're going to see more reports of people saying to Pelosi, "We got to do this now." That's my guess, but who knows?
Here's hoping.
Hope springs
And
eternal.
I just want to say that. I'm sorry. The only person I can hear is you, Sam, right now.
Okay.
I just want to say also Mueller botched this. I mean, I'm an attorney myself, and it reminds me a lot of I used to work for a DOJ as a contractor investigating financial firms for the Wall Street crash. And when it comes down to it, it's about political force of will. I read the Mueller report, and there's a lot of suggestions and stuff, but it's from weak ass sauce. I have to say, like. If I don't even know why Mueller signed up for this. He didn't believe that you could prosecute the president at all.
I will say this. I am inclined to have some sympathy for the guy, because there's a lot of pressure. This is a very difficult situation on one hand. On the other hand, you make a very, very good point. Like, what did you see? I know what you were told to do, but what did you really see? What did you really see is your mandate? I mean, there was a book, Jesse Eisinger, he came on this program called The Chicken Shit Club. And it was really about Mueller's time and Comey's time in the DOJ. And that is like this this fear of prosecution. And I think there's a big part of that. I also think, look, the stakes are very high. I mean, from a guy like this who's probably institutionalist, he's probably nervous about it. I'm also, frankly, and this is, those are the two sort of like most predominant thoughts I have about this. I also can't help but feel that there is a significant chunk of the story that may not directly have direct bearing on what the investigation was about, but that involved what was reported at the time as this sort of mutiny coming out of the New York FBI office. That involves Felix Seder, who still was supposed to testify, it just melted away. No reporting on it, just melted away. Felix Seder, a massive lawsuit that was being brought against Felix Seder, melted away. Guy who was on record as being a CIA and FBI asset to the extent that Loretta Lynch is writing, letters of recommendation to a court on his behalf. I think there is something else that was going on that may have nothing to do with this per se, but that Mueller is, had to tiptoe around. And I don't think we'll ever know about it. I haven't seen any reporting about it. Nobody seems to even, wonder, like, where's Felix Seder? He didn't testify? He was a day away from testifying, and then all of a sudden they just punted it to nowhere.
To say that he was a source for Osama bin Laden's phone a week ago.
Yes, it was reported that he was the source for Osama bin Laden's cell phone. He clearly was involved in money laundering, and was clearly using that as a mechanism in which to provide the CIA and the FBI with information about stuff that presumably a money launderer would pick up. And so I don't know if we're ever going to hear about And presumably, if Loretta Lynch is writing this stuff from the Eastern District of New York, USA's office, then it's the New York FBI office that's running him. And that New York FBI office, people can go back and read in September, October of 2016. There were reports, in the Times and the Post about like a mutiny that was coming out of there because they were mad at Comey. And I just think that there's a whole part of this story that we're just never going to really hear synthesized. And I don't know what it is. I don't think it's crazy stuff, but I think it's stuff that's probably embarrassing to the FBI about what they allowed Felix Sater to get away with. Maybe that they've turned a blind eye to people, associates of Felix Sater's, who have been committing crimes, been maybe a receptacle for money and laundered money. And they turned a blind eye to this, maybe for a decade. And, maybe that person ends up as president and they didn't want to really talk about it. I don't know, but it's weird. Appreciate the call.
It's just one last thing.
Yeah.
It's still the end, still May. If anybody's listening and hasn't registered to vote, please do. We have a chance to have a really great prosecutor happen in Queens, Tiffany Caban. She's a public defender. Register before the end of May. Vote for her. See some actually good prosecutors for a change.
Yes, register.
Yeah, she's got the endorsement of the DSA. We've been running canvassing operations for her periodically.
I'm one of them, yeah.
Oh, hell yeah.
I've been knocking doors, yeah. Very excited.
Thank you for your service.
Good job. All right, thanks, Ellie. All right, final call of the day, folks. Sorry, got to wrap this up a little bit early today. Got a lot of people who have been on hold for over an hour. The next person in line, 716 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. This is Brendan from Buffalo.
Brendan from
I just
Buffalo.
want to have one. Yeah. So I was going to say one thing. I saw yesterday's show, and I want to say that it's really hype that you play Secret Hitler. I play that game all the time with my friends.
Oh,
so much fun.
Yeah, I played it. I played it with some comedians. It's pretty fun.
There you go.
Yeah, pretty obnoxious.
Yeah, sounds like a good crowd to play it with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my question is like, are you familiar with Peter Joseph? And if you are, I just wanted to know what your thoughts are, or if Jamie or Brennan are familiar with him. They're obviously free to comment about it too.
Peter Joseph?
Yeah.
I don't know who that is.
He's the creator of the Zeitgeist trilogy. I don't know if you're familiar with the Zeitgeist film. He also has a popular YouTube series titled Culture in Decline.
Seem to remember that. That was sort of big, back, I don't know, a year or two ago? I don't know. I remember.
Yeah, so, the original Zeitgeist film came out maybe in the mid early 2000s, I think it was 2006 or something like that. Yeah, and the first film's kind of controversial, but the second and third films are less off the rails, so to speak. But he's, I don't know, he might not agree with this, but the way I might describe it would be he kind of almost repackages far leftism without using the term socialism and communism and those ideas to I don't know, try to make it maybe more accessible and less stigmatized. So,
okay.
I don't know. I guess I would just encourage you guys to maybe check out some of his stuff. He has a new book out called The New Human Rights Movement. And I don't know, it's very solid. It came out in 2017. And then his most recent work is that he's working on a film called Interreflections that's supposed to come out within, I don't know, the deadline has been extended over and over again, but I'm sure once it comes out, he'd be looking for shows to go on and things like that. So I'd encourage you to maybe keep your eyes peeled and maybe have him on the show when the film comes out, something like that.
Okay, so I'm seeing here he presents conspiracy theories. Is he trying to sell you the conspiracy theories, or is he looking at it in more of a sociological way?
So I would say it's more sociological, and that's the thing is the first film is so stigmatized because he does cover topics like 9/11 and the Fed and he has since, I think, changed his positions on those topics since he was kind of young when he made the first film. Go on.
I gotta say, because I've done 2 conspiracy theory episodes now on my show, The Antifada, and I am definitely interested in these things from a sociological perspective, and I think people have a whole lot of really valid reasons to be suspicious of the government and the state, considering all the things we know the state has done. It's not a theory. But if you talk about this stuff without I've heard it put before that conspiracy theories, Illuminati theory, all that stuff, it's like the class analysis of fools. You know, you need a class analysis in there, otherwise it can veer off in some really right-wing and unconstructive direction.
Well, it's also incredibly disempowering. I mean, my take on someone like Alex Jones has always been, if he didn't exist, those forces that he supposedly rails against would create him. Like, you don't have to think that there's some type of special, meeting of the elite and they kill an owl or whatever it is. You can just know that, like, the elite have aligned interests, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out what those aligned interests are. And maybe they run into each other at Davos and say, like, are you doing this? Yeah, I'm doing that. I mean, I do that with other podcasters, and you pick up a couple of, ideas like, oh, you should use this software or that software. I mean, and it then basically disempowers you because it takes you down a rabbit hole chasing some type of mysticism when in fact this is not mystical. This is not, this is not Star Chamber stuff. It's just the way that people with aligned interests, and if you are a billionaire, your interests are aligned with other billionaires and completely misaligned with like 99.95% of the world. And you're going to do things, you've lost touch with humanity in many respects, and you're going to do things that are, are detrimental to the rest of the world. And to attribute that to some type of special, secret cult and they're vampires or changelings or whatever it is, just disempowers people. But I if I run across it and have some time, which never happens, but if I do, I will check that out, and maybe we'll see. We'll see. I'll look into it a little bit.
I mean, it's frustrating.
Awesome.
It's so frustrating for me because different groups of people believe conspiracy theories for different reasons, right? And a lot of the people who are most oppressed by capitalism, a lot of people in the Black community believe in certain kinds of conspiracy theories that are based in like facts. Like, the government has done all sorts of messed up things to Black people that have been documented in history.
It's on the record,
and like a lot of like teens, youth believe in this stuff, and like it's a smart impulse, right? It's people who are smart enough to know that there's something messed up happening, but they don't have access to the information about what the specifics are. So like a friend of mine did a really cool project, actually, which was a pamphlet called How to Overthrow the Illuminati. And it's geared towards teenagers, and it takes their belief in this stuff seriously. It takes the reasons behind it seriously. And then it takes you through why this is actually not a good explanation for what's wrong with the world.
Back on the rails,
and then it takes you through to an analysis that, actually there is a global system conspiring to oppress you, and it's called capitalism. So I hope you check that out.
Right.
All right. I got to go. Appreciate the call. All right, folks.
Thanks for having me on.
I'll just say really quickly, unless there's a huge difference between the second 2 movies and the first Zeitgeist, I don't think we will be covering that on this show.
All right, folks. Got to jump. That's not a coincidence. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in. get somewhere the choice is made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years, while I shifted in and out of gear, waiting for my moment to happen. I don't know how much longer I can stay in, or how much more I got to pay to play in. I know somehow the lights got graded, somewhere before the credits faded.